And we're joined by no stranger to this media center, Denny Hamlin, driver of the number FedEx Express Toyota for Joe Gibbs Racing. Denny, you posted a really cool picture on Twitter with the Daytona 500 winning car and the trophy case. I think I saw a grandfather clock sitting in the corner of that room. Talk about that trophy setup you have going on there.
Yeah, it's cool. I knew that eventually I'd want something in there, you know, when I was designing the house, but really just worked out nice to where, you know, had a nice little spotlight there under the trophy. So eventually one day I'd like to have a championship car and a championship trophy there. That might trump it. I don't know.
Good deal. We'll open the floor for questions. We'll start here with Claire, and then we'll work our way around here.
Dale Earnhardt Jr. was talking about Claire B. Lang, Sirius XM NASCAR Radio. Dale Jr. was talking about how there are like 20, 21, 22 teams that could win right now. And in the day, you know, maybe 5, maybe 6. You used to be so good here. How would you rack yourself up and how everyone has improved? And legitimately, like you were the fastest in practice, how much harder has the competition come your way at a track like Martinsville?
Well, I think the competition in general, every single racetrack is tightened up because of data sharing. I think that the gap between the great drivers and the good drivers is smaller than ever, simply because we share each other's data. So there's really no advantages to be had. All these drivers, I mean, anybody that does enough homework can drive the car like the lines tell you to drive it and get better. So I think that's where the gap you know, has gotten smaller over the years for sure. But you still, in race situations, as tires wear out, you have to adapt, and that's kind of where you still can get little advantages here and there.
How many drivers do you think at Martinsville are at the level that you are?
One.
It's a good answer. We'll go next to Bob.
Bob Pockers, ESPN. How does Dave Rogers' leave impact your team?
Yeah, it's tough, you know, for Dave and those guys. You know, they've already had a few wrenches thrown their way before the season even started. You know, but Daniel's with a guy who he's had a lot of success with, and when we talked about, you know, having a guy come up, I thought it was a pretty easy answer to have Scott come up and do it for him, since he had so much success with him in the Xfinity Series. And you know, it would take a crew chief a long time just to kind of understand Daniel inside the car. So I think having someone with that experience with him it was a must.
Okay, we're going to go next to my friend here at Channel 10, then to Dustin, then to Mike.
Eric Johnson, WSLS 10. Denny, if you would just talk about finding your groove here in Martinsville. It seems like it's one of those tracks where it takes a while for some of the younger drivers, such as a Kyle Larson and others, to really find their groove here.
Yeah, but you know, they've like I say, they've closed the gap dramatically. You know that you know, this is one of those tracks where, you know, you can be off on aero, you can be off on a few little things here and there, and the driver can kind of overcome any of those deficits with you know, technique at this racetrack. You know, you really have to have a good setup, and I think that, you know, guys that sometimes hit it, even if they're young and inexperienced, can run well here. You know, Kyle's actually ran up front here, I think, in the last few races. So I would expect, you know, his cars have gotten faster over the off season. So I would expect he'd be a challenger for sure.
Go next here to Dustin, then to Mike, then we'll go to Jacob.
Dustin Long, NBC Sports. Denny, earlier this week you promoted on social media a story that was talking about potentially an all-star race here, and I wanted to ask you, as somebody who's a general sports fan, is you know, you've seen the value of the all-star games, but more like the events, the home run derby, the three-point shooting contest, things like that. Is the bigger question about this sports all-star event more about how to truly showcase a driver's talent, just as the NBA showcases the three-point shooting and dunk, and how should that be incorporated as opposed to whether you move it to a different facility or not?
I think that's a very valid question. I think anytime the bigger the racetrack gets, the less that it becomes about the driver. I mean, that's just, you know, simple thinking there. Like I said, you can make up here at these racetracks, these small ones, driver can make a difference. So yeah, I mean, I'd like to see it move around, and obviously, for selfish reasons, the shorter the better. But I also think from a fan's perspective, you put us on a tight racetrack with big stakes like an all-star race. You're liable to see some tempers and some bad judgment moves in a lot of places. So I think that it wouldn't hurt to move it around to some different places. And I think now that this place has lights, it's an interesting venue. You can't run it in October or February, but in the middle of the summer, nighttime would be pretty cool here.
Is that something? And obviously, the Drivers' Council was involved in the format at last year's All Stars. Is that something that you guys, as a group, have kind of talked to? I mean, I know
Still, yeah. There's still some talks about it. I think this year is done, and we know what we're going to do. But for sure, in 2018, those discussions are still going on about when and where.
Go next to Mike, and then to Jacob, and then to Jonathan.
Mike Hembry, USA Today. Should there be a sense of alarm at all that the two of the sport's best teams, Gibbs and Hendrick, haven't won yet?
Kinda, maybe, but we haven't really hit the heart of the season yet. We've been to some very intricate type of racetracks that are a little different. Our season always starts off that way, but I think that really 8 races in is when you can really look at the bigger picture and kind of figure out where you're at. I think I know where we are at this point, and the things that we need to work on, and by no means are we at the top. So we as a company have a good idea of where we're at, but I don't think people from the outside looking can really make a judgment until probably 8 to 9 races.
Go next to Jacob.
I'm going to get up because I'm short and hidden back here. Jacob Seelman, Performance Motorsports Network. Denny, you talked about the competition closing things up. I mean, 6 different winners in the last 6 races here, but there was a time when it seemed like the only 2 people that knew how to get to victory lane here and win clocks were you and Johnson. You got 4 out of 6. He had 5 out of 6 at one point. I know you mentioned everything's getting tighter, but can you put your finger on, or have you noticed anything specific that has led to the increased parity here?
Data sharing. Data sharing has changed the game in which, drivers learn how to be fast and how to be good at certain racetracks. That really was kind of a turning point, I think, for myself. But in really circumstances, when every time if the field gets closer to you, you have less room for error. To get a race win. And really, I've had so many speeding penalties at this racetrack, and I think I wrecked here in the spring last year, wheel hopping, trying to come from the back from a speeding penalty. So when the field gets close like that, and that just makes you have to be on your game every single time, where before I feel like I could have kind of overcome anything that kind of threw our way at any point of the race. There's just, you can't do that now. Yeah, but I think that once they've seen it one time and they copy that and they use it to learn, they refine it for their own particular style, and they've started to make it work for them. I mean, Matt and Kyle really, arguably, probably been maybe a little better than us in probably half of the last 6 races. So the information's already been given. You can't take it back, and as a company, it makes us better, and at least, the company got a race win here in the spring.
Okay, we'll go next to Jonathan, and then the man in the black there, and Jared.
Jonathan Merriman, NASCAR.com. Denny, obviously, data sharing is a big part of, your teammates catching you. How much do you kind of keep to yourself mentally about, I mean, you can have all the data you want to, but if you don't have a feel for the racetrack, you're not going to be able to run up front. Mm-hmm. Do you keep anything to yourself in terms of, breaking points and all that stuff, just kind of mental notes, or do you divulge that to them as well?
Yeah, I give every bit of information that I have. There's been times in practice here where I've felt something that's been better for me, and I will walk right next door and tell those guys what it was. so that it would help them. So I don't know. It probably has lost me a few races here and there doing that, but I think in the grand scheme of things, I would want that same thing from them at most of the other racetracks. So I just feel like it makes you better overall, and I wouldn't change it for that reason.
Hey, Denny, back here. Aaron McFarling with the Roanoke Times. First 500 lap race to feature stage racing. Curious, as a guy who's had so much success here, how you think that might change the strategy on Sunday?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that probably will affect strategy is we have 2 sets less tires this week, and I know that we've actually been close on sets of tires here in the past before. Races have been going green a little bit longer this year because of the stage races. When you're going to have the yellows, the scheduled yellows. So it might not be a big of an issue, but I think that stages will be intense. I mean, you're going to be going for every point. This is a race that I hope to be getting a lot of points through stages and through our finish. We haven't really logged a whole lot of stage points this year. We've had every time we've finished good, it's been at the end of the races, and it just that doesn't pay off as good as it used to with the stages. So I think that it makes you race more intense right from the very beginning. And what I talked about with the speeding penalty, if you have a speeding penalty in the beginning of this race, you might as well not even count on getting any stage points that first segment. So you got to be flawless for this entire race if you want to optimize it.
Okay, we'll go next to Jared, then up front to Kenny, then to Yvonne, and then to Caleb.
Yeah, Jared Turner, Edge Set Marketing. Denny, one question and then one quick follow-up. Looking at drivers who excel in the 500 and 600 mile races, is there something that you feel like those drivers all have in common that enables them to succeed in the longer events?
Not really. I wouldn't say that there's anything physically that makes them better or worse. I think that when you pile enough statistics together, there's always going to be a few people that are at the top. Why they're up top, it might be a good racetrack for them, things like that. But I don't think that, in my opinion, I think that everyone's physically fit enough now that there's very little fatigue at the end of these races. Nothing like it used to be.
And just to follow up real quick, just kind of looking ahead at the road courses, obviously they've been really crazy the last few years. When you throw stage racing into the mix, to what extent do you expect the stages to perhaps make the racing on the road courses even crazier?
Yeah, I think you could have a potential, for the craziness of the road courses really comes at the end of the races, and I think that you have a potential for that to happen 2 to 3 times in the middle of that race. So I mean, you can risk, trying to get stage points or a stage win by making an aggressive move, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's not going to pay off for you if you don't finish. So you still have to be smart in that aspect.
Come back up front to Kenny.
Kenny Bruce with NASCAR.com. Denny, when you talk about data sharing, how much of that is sharing information that you as a driver have developed, like where your braking points are and things like that out on the track, and how much of it is more specific to the car setup wise?
It's a lot of it is driver driven versus car setup. I mean, I think, I look back to data from long time ago when we tested here 10 years ago, and I still drive the same type of way that I do now, and that's a total different car, different rules, different tire, everything. Once you find something that works at a given racetrack, no matter what you're driving, you always try to emulate that because that's what you were successful with. So I think that it's more driver driven, the data that you see, than car setup.
Come to your left here to Yvonne.
Denny, over here. Yvonne Jones, Kicking the Tires. Jimmy Johnson gave away one of his clocks. This is a 2-part question. Would you give away any of your 5, and to whom would you give?
A few of them, they're spread out now a little bit. There's one at Fuel Sports Management, the agency that represents me. There's my buddy has one at his house. At the time, I was in between houses, so I let him borrow one. My parents have one, and others are in my house and garage now. So they're all spread out. Eventually, I'll have them all come back to home. But yeah, I wouldn't mind. I don't mind sharing.
Okay, thank you.
Go next to Caleb, and I believe the gentleman in the back with the Orioles hat has a question.
Caleb Whistler, Speedway Digest. 5 races in, the eyeball test of the aero package and the quality of passes is low and not what anybody expected with this package. As the active voice of the Drivers Council, how would you approach making changes to make the racing even better?
Well, I think we've had a relatively small sample size. I think that we've had probably fewer cautions than what we've had in the past, and that doesn't help the passes, the green flag passes, because you have jumbling up on pit road. Faster cars have a bad pit stop. They got to come back through the field. So that part of it hampers passing a little bit. It'd be interesting to revisit that probably mid to later in the season. But I think overall the racing itself has been very, very good. We've seen battles for the lead every single week. So overall we've been pretty happy with it. Corner speeds are down, which is good. That's something that we wanted. There's been more tire fall off this year, which has been good. That's what we wanted. So I think we're heading in a good direction. But early in seasons, there's some teams that are on top right now that are very hot and their cars are fast, and it's going to take a while for the competition to catch up. When they catch up, fields get tighter, more passing happens.
Stay on your left here to Matt.
Matt Weaver, AutoWeek.com. I've got 2 for you, Denny. When you and Brad got into each other last week, I thought it was kind of remarkable that Brad was able to drive that car all the way to second place. 5 years ago, these cars were so aero dependent that you really couldn't do that. Are we now at the point where we have the cars that are more reliant on mechanical grip than aero compared to, say, years past?
More so than years past, but still, they still have too much aero for sure. We've cut the spoiler off as much as you can cut it off. We would have to do it in different ways now. One thing that I really think that we should try is getting our quarter panels off the ground. I think that the air that comes around that back tire has no choice but to just stay really wide, because it can't wrap around and go underneath the bumper and then allow the second car to get air. So I would like for them to cut those quarter panels up. I think it would reduce side force, reduce corner speed, and probably give the second car even more air and a bigger advantage. So there's always work that can be done. But yeah, it was good to see a beat up car that was able to do it, and he did it through circumstances. There were some good cautions that came at the right time. I think me and him were about 8th or 9th for most of the day until they made the right pit call strategy at the end, and it really worked out well for him. But still, it's good to see some beat up cars able to run well.
And lastly, as a late model guy, there's the cone rule here at Martinsville. Would you be in favor of that here for the Cup race, given that if you restart on the outside, you're kind of basically screwed and you can't be able to race your way towards the front?
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. Can't say that it has not come up before. It has come up, especially for racetracks like these where people were playing games on pit road to try to get an inside position. You see the restart. Sometimes there's a lot of games being played between teammates trying to let each other in. So yeah, it definitely would be interesting to try it one time and see how it turns out.
Okay, we're going to go to your right to Charles, and then we'll wrap up with Robbie.
Charles Work, Star News. 70 years anniversary. You think we'll be racing there 70 years from now?
I sure hope so, or hope somebody is. I won't be here, but no, it's a great short track. I mean, when you come in here and you come through the tunnel, you feel like you're at your old track from way back when. So love short tracks like these. We could use more of them. Everyone now always says that, more short tracks. So it's a great racetrack. Clay and his whole family's done a great job keeping it up with the times, and the fan experience is good here. They always see a great race, so I wouldn't see why it would ever leave here.
Okay, we're going to wrap up on your left with Robbie.
Robbie Mays, MRN. Denny, talk of repaving racetracks has been in the news a lot the last couple of months. Next weekend, we're going to Texas Motor Speedway, newly repaved, new configuration there. What are your thoughts heading to Texas next week? And as a follow-up, who do you got in the Final Four this weekend?
Well, I got 3 of the Final 4 right, which is amazing. I didn't have South Carolina, obviously. That was a dark horse, but I actually have I had Gonzaga winning the whole thing, actually beating Oregon in the final. So we'll see how that turns out. I think I've about won my pool because everybody else had Duke or somebody like that in there. So that's that part of it's good. What was your first part? Texas is going to be interesting. It's hard to say what that track's going to be like. I know they tried some different asphalt on there, ones that will hopefully wear tires, but I've never seen a new pavement wear tires before. The configurations change where it's flatter in 1 and 2, even flatter than it was. So I don't know. It's going to be a racetrack that will be different than any mile and a half that we run at. I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's. I just hope the groove widens out so we can race there side by side. That will be the challenge, and that's always the challenge with new paved racetracks is side by side racing.
Denny, thanks for taking the time to
Thank you.
join us today, and good luck.